God is always and everywhere truthful, for he can never bear falsehood. As Jesus, God-made man, described himself, "I am the way and the truth and the life." More than simply being unable to speak false propositions, God is truth in himself, and his nature cannot permit that which is not true. Because man is made in God's image and likeness, he is called to imitate this priority for the truth, which means not only that we should know the major truths of the faith, but also that we cannot communicate that which we know to be false. This is framed most famously in the 10 Commandments against bearing false witness, but is said especially strongly in Psalm 5, which notes that God hates all who do evil. You destroy those who speak falsely. But what makes something a lie, and how should we define lying? We can understand what lying is by looking to the angelic doctor, Thomas Aquinas, who says, "Words are naturally signs of intellectual acts. It is unnatural and undue for anyone to signify by words something that is not in his mind. Hence from this we know that to lie is to communicate to another something that is contrary to the intellectual acts of our minds. This sin of lying, like all moral acts, can be either materially evil, formally evil, or both formally and materially evil. A material falsehood is an erroneous statement which is told in ignorance, where someone earnestly believes that they are telling the truth, but in actuality is speaking falsehood. In this case, a person is not culpable, which is to say guilty, of the sin of lying. If something is a formal lie, but not a material falsehood, that means that a person believes they are telling a falsehood, even though they are not, and therefore they are culpable of moral evil. And in the third case, where someone is both materially and formally committing falsehood, a person is both speaking falsehood in actuality and also knows that what they are saying is false, and in this case, they are certainly also culpable. Whenever discussing the sin of lying, some are quick to provide supposed exceptions, which is often done by arguing in one of 3 ways. First, that not all untruths communicated to another person are lies. Secondly, that lies, which we have established are moral evils, are sometimes permitted to achieve a greater good. Or thirdly, by appealing to a principle that not all men are owed the truth if it is not pertinent to them, or they would do evil if they were to know it. In the case of the first argument, this has already been refuted above by the definition of lying, for we know that when we communicate falsely any intellectual positions we hold in our mind, we commit the sin of lying in its formal sense. As Aquinas notes, the essential notion of a lie is taken from formal falsehood, from the fact, namely, that a person intends to say what is false. In the case of the second argument, which says that we are sometimes allowed to commit the moral evil of lying for the sake of some greater good, we must keep in mind that the Church forbids us to think like consequentialists or act utilitarians, who hold that if some particular evil act results in some great good, we should do it for the sake of that great good. For Christian ethics revolves around the will of the person doing an action, and the content of that moral action itself. Though God forgives any sin for those who seek repentance, nevertheless, in principle, Christians are never permitted to commit even the smallest of venial sins, for any reason whatsoever, no matter how good the result may be. This is because every single venial sin wounds God and harms charity in our soul, damaging our relationship with Him, and the love of God is always paramount. One of the strongest scriptural accounts that an advocate of lying might use to contradict this sentiment is found in the book of Exodus, when the Egyptian midwives knew that Pharaoh desired to kill the Hebrew babies, and they lied to him so as to preserve the lives of the Hebrews. As the scriptures recount, the king of Egypt told the Hebrew midwives, "If it is a boy, kill him, but if it is a girl, she may live." The midwives, however, feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt had ordered them, but let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this, allowing the boys to live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "The Hebrew women give birth before the midwife arrives." Therefore, God dealt well with the midwives, because the midwives feared God. God built up families for them. In this story, there is no denying that God rewarded the Egyptian midwives. Should we therefore conclude that the moral law is conditional, and that some evil acts are permitted if they lead to a greater good? Not at all. Aquinas directly responds to this scriptural account, where he explains, "The midwives were rewarded not for their lie, but for their fear of God, and for their good will, which latter led them to tell a lie. Hence it is expressly stated, Exodus 2:21, and because the midwives feared God, he built them houses. but the subsequent lie was not meritorious. In the third argument in favor of lying, some have argued that God does not intend that every person should know every truth, or that some people do not deserve the truth, and that therefore it is not a sin to lie to that person. After all, the Catechism notes that the good and safety of others, respect for privacy, and the common good are sufficient reasons for being silent about what ought to be known or for making use of a discreet language. No one is bound to reveal the truth to someone who does not have the right to know it. From this, we know that not everyone has the right to every single truth, but we should not therefore assume that we are allowed to lie, although we may be silent if necessity calls for it, or communicate that we cannot speak further upon a subject. As the Catechism also says, by its very nature, lying is to be condemned. It is profanation of speech, whereas the purpose of speech is to communicate known truth to others. Because the purpose of speech is to communicate the truth, it is a violation of what it means to communicate with another, to wound them with a lie. Although in justice, we can and sometimes should deprive someone of an individual good, such as choosing not to reveal a particular truth through silence, we can never do moral evil ourselves to prevent the moral evil of another. No one ever deserves to have an inherent evil committed against them, such as lying, for no sin against another is ever justified, as it violates the love of neighbor which we owe to all persons. Speech and communication in general is made for truth, for we are reflections of God who is that ultimate truth. Therefore, let us always strive to communicate that which is true to the fullest extent possible, in honor of our Creator. Thanks for watching this video on the difficult topic of lying. If you want to learn more about why we should trust the exegetical opinion of Thomas Aquinas on the Scriptures, see my earlier video about the Church's teaching on this doctor of the Church.